I'm ABC 15 data analyst Garrett Archer, and I'm taking you inside the numbers on the Federal Reserve's favorite inflation gauge, how it cooled in January, but also saw the largest drop in consumer spending since the COVID-19 pandemic. So consumers, obviously a huge part of our economy, and the data on their spending in January had good, okay, bad, and ugly news. But starting with the good, annual inflation on consumer spending came in at 2.5%, which means inflation is still on a cooling trend. In all, we spent just under $16.3 billion. Now, the okay. Consumers are shifting some of their spending habits, spending less in January on goods and services that are nice to haves, like recreational vehicles, furnishings and home goods, and clothing and footwear. Meanwhile, they are spending more on a lot of need-to-haves, including housing and utilities, gas and insurance. You can see here that there are still some nice-to-haves and need-to-have categories both rising and falling, which is why economists are not raising their red flag on this quite yet. But now to the bad news. That $16.3 billion that I mentioned, that's a $53 billion drop in consumer spending from December. That's only happened 3 times in the last 4 years. A $17 billion drop in March of 23 and a $33 billion drop in February of 21. Going back further, though, this is still rare. Only 38 drops since the year 2000, with about half clustered around the Great Recession and the pandemic years. And finally, the ugly. The Atlanta Federal Reserve publishes a rolling forecast of GDP growth that updates with each new economic release. And this consumer expenses release did cause it to shift into the red. They are now forecasting the GDP will shrink by 1.5% in the first quarter of this year. This is a rolling forecast, though, with a month left in this quarter, so it could still shift back into the green. With Look Inside the Numbers, I'm Garrett Archer, ABC 15, Arizona.